Imagine it's the dead of night. You're lying in bed, the silence around you so thick it feels suffocating. Then you hear a noise. At first you think it's just the house settling, but it grows louder, closer. Your heart starts racing as you realize you're not alone. Get ready for some terrifying encounters that happened when the clock struck midnight. Hi guys, welcome back to the channel. In today's video, we'll uncover 3 disturbing, true dead-of-night horror stories that will leave you wide awake and questioning the safety of your own home. So grab your blanket, turn off the lights, and let's dive in. Story 1. The Midnight Caller by Lily Matthews. Lily Matthews had always dreamed of living in a quiet, peaceful neighborhood far from the noise of the city. After years of apartment living, she finally found a charming house on the outskirts of town, surrounded by tall trees and quiet streets. The house was perfect, spacious with a warm and welcoming atmosphere, just what she had imagined for a fresh start. She moved in excitedly, ready to begin this new chapter of her life. The first few days in the house were everything she hoped for. She unpacked her boxes, arranged her furniture, and spent evenings on the porch, enjoying the crisp, cool air of early summer. It was a dream come true, until the night everything changed. At exactly midnight, the phone rang. Lily's eyes shot open at the sharp sound of the shrill ringtone. Disoriented and still half asleep, she reached over to pick up the receiver. She didn't recognize the number, but her curiosity got the best of her. Maybe it was a wrong number, or perhaps someone had the wrong area code. "Hello?" Lily answered groggily, sitting up in bed. There was a long pause on the other end of the line, followed by the sound of slow, labored breathing. Lily's grip on the phone tightened. Something about the silence was unsettling. She was about to hang up, thinking it was just a prank call, when the voice on the other end broke the silence. "I see you," the voice whispered, its tone low and unnerving. Lily's heart skipped a beat. The words sent a chill down her spine. She couldn't explain why, but something in that voice felt wrong. Cold, hollow, almost distant. She pulled the phone away from her ear for a second, as if to ensure she wasn't imagining it. She could hear her own breathing, shallow and anxious, as she tried to comprehend the situation. "Who is this?" she asked, her voice shaky despite her efforts to sound calm. But there was no answer, only more slow, deliberate breathing. Then the voice spoke again, sending another wave of fear crashing over her. "I know where you are." Lily's blood ran cold. It wasn't just a prank anymore. Whoever was on the other end knew she was alone in the house, knew exactly where she was. Her mind raced as she tried to think logically. Could it be a neighbor playing a cruel joke? Maybe someone she had met in passing? Without waiting for a response, Lily slammed the phone down on the receiver. Her hands were trembling, her pulse pounding in her ears. She glanced toward the window, half expecting to see someone standing outside in the shadows. The house was dark, and the only sound was the occasional rustle of leaves outside in the breeze. But everything seemed too still, too quiet. It was as though the world had frozen around her. She quickly dialed 911, her fingers trembling as she punched in the numbers. The operator's voice was calm and reassuring as she explained the situation. "We'll send someone over to check on you," the operator assured her, though Lily's nerves remained frayed. After hanging up, she locked every door and window in the house, her thoughts racing. The house had always felt safe, but now, every creak in the floorboards made her jump. Every gust of wind outside made her heart race. The police arrived hours later and checked the house thoroughly. They found no signs of forced entry, no indication of anyone being there. They chalked it up to a prank call, but advised Lily to be cautious. Still, Lily couldn't shake the unsettling feeling. The voice, the way it had spoken to her, haunted her thoughts. Minutes turned into hours, but the house was silent. No more calls came. But Lily stayed awake all night, staring into the shadows, waiting for something, anything to happen. She was on edge, convinced the caller would return. But as the morning light crept in, the house remained still. That night, just as she was about to drift off to sleep, the phone rang again. The hairs on the back of Lily's neck stood on end as she hesitated to answer. She finally picked up the receiver, but this time, there was no voice, no whisper. Only an eerie clicking sound before the line went dead. Lily moved out of the house soon after, unable to shake the feeling that someone was still watching her. The phone calls stopped, but her fear lingered. Wherever she went, she could never fully escape the chilling memory of the midnight caller. Story 2, The Dark Figure at the Window by David Harris. David Harris had always loved the peace and quiet of his country home. Nestled in a remote corner of New England, the old farmhouse was far from the hustle and bustle of city life, offering a sense of serenity that David cherished. After years of living in a crowded apartment, he had bought the house to escape the noise and start fresh. The house had a rich history, with its creaking wooden floors and aged wallpaper telling stories of the past. At night, the only sounds were the wind rustling through the trees and the occasional chirp of crickets. It was the perfect place to relax, read, and enjoy the solitude. One particularly cold evening in late October, David decided to spend the night reading a book in the living room. The fireplace crackled, casting flickering shadows across the room. He'd been alone for a few days, and the stillness of the house was oddly comforting. But as the night grew darker, a feeling of unease crept over him, as though something was wrong. It started with a noise, a faint scratching sound that seemed to come from the direction of the window. David tried to ignore it, convincing himself it was just the wind brushing against the old glass. But the sound persisted, growing louder and more distinct. It was as if something or someone was trying to get his attention. Annoyed, David set his book down and stood up to investigate. As he walked toward the window, he could see nothing but the inky blackness of the night outside. He opened the curtains, expecting to find nothing but the empty field beyond. But then, he saw it. A dark figure, standing motionless just outside the window. It was tall, cloaked in shadow with no clear features. The figure was still, as though it were waiting for him to notice it. David's heart raced as he stared at the silhouette, unable to move. The figure didn't move, didn't blink, but seemed to be staring right back at him. David's breath caught in his throat. He took a step back, his legs suddenly feeling weak. He couldn't explain it, but he felt an overwhelming sense of dread wash over him, as though this figure had been watching him for much longer than just a few moments. His instincts screamed at him to get away, but he stood frozen, unable to look away. Suddenly, the figure began to move. Slowly, it turned and began to drift away from the window. David watched in a stunned silence, his mind racing with fear and confusion. The figure seemed to glide across the yard, disappearing into the trees at the edge of the property. But just before it disappeared completely, David thought he saw it turn back toward the house, as if watching him one last time. He couldn't shake the image of the figure as it vanished into the night. Heart pounding, he quickly checked the locks on all the doors and windows, then turned on every light in the house. But the more he tried to rationalize what he had seen, the more the fear grew. Who or what had been standing outside his window? David spent the rest of the night wide awake, the silence of the house now deafening. The scratching noise never came back, but the fear lingered. He couldn't shake the thought of what might have been outside watching him in the dark. The following morning, he ventured outside to check the area around the window, but there was no sign of anyone having been there. No footprints, no disturbances in the grass. It was as if the figure had never existed. But David knew what he had seen. And every night after that, the figure's image haunted him, lurking in the back of his mind. He couldn't help but wonder, had it been a ghost? Or was it something else? Something far darker? He moved out of the house a few months later, unable to shake the terrifying memory of the dark figure at the window. The house remained empty for some time after that, its eerie stillness untouched by any further visitors. But David would never forget the feeling of being watched that night, an unsettling presence that would stay with him for the rest of his life. Story 3, The Haunting in the Attic by Rebecca Cole. Rebecca Cole had recently moved into an old Victorian house in the countryside. It was the kind of house that seemed to tell stories with every creaking floorboard and every dusty corner. The house was far from modern, but it was full of character, and Rebecca loved its charm. It was perfect for starting her new life, away from the noise of the city. When she first moved in, the attic seemed like the perfect storage space. It was large, with old beams crisscrossing the ceiling, and the floor was covered in dusty boxes and forgotten furniture. Rebecca didn't pay much attention to it at first, thinking it was just a part of the house that wasn't used often. But that would soon change. One evening, after a long day of unpacking, Rebecca decided to head up to the attic to store a few boxes she had left in the living room. As she climbed the creaky stairs, she couldn't shake the feeling that she wasn't alone. The air in the attic was thick with dust and stale, and there was an odd coldness that seemed out of place for the otherwise warm house. She set the boxes down and began to sift through the items left behind by the previous owners. Most of the stuff was old furniture, forgotten trinkets, and piles of newspapers. But something caught her eye, a small, weathered mirror tucked away in the corner. It was old-fashioned, with a tarnished silver frame. Intrigued, Rebecca picked it up and wiped away the dust. As she stared at the mirror, she felt a strange sensation, a tingle running up her spine. The reflection didn't seem right. At first, she thought it was just the dim light playing tricks on her. But as she looked closer, she saw something moving in the background, a shadow just behind her, shifting and growing darker. Rebecca turned around quickly, but the attic was empty save for the forgotten relics scattered about. Her heart began to race. She shrugged it off as her imagination running wild and placed the mirror down. But as she was about to leave the attic, she heard something, a faint whisper as though someone was calling her name. "Rebecca?" the voice said softly, almost too softly to hear. She spun around, but the attic was still empty. The whispering stopped, leaving her standing there, frozen with fear. She quickly hurried back downstairs, trying to calm herself. It had to be the wind, or perhaps the old house settling, nothing more. The next day, she decided to take a closer look at the attic, convinced that she must have heard something fall or shift the night before. As she climbed the stairs once more, she could feel her heart pounding in her chest. The whispering had stopped, but she couldn't shake the feeling that something was waiting for her in the dark. When she reached the attic, she was relieved to find nothing out of the ordinary. But as she turned to leave, her eyes caught the mirror again. This time, the reflection was different. The shadow in the background was no longer a vague blur. It was the clear outline of a figure, a woman standing just behind Rebecca, her face hidden in the darkness. In that instant, Rebecca felt a cold breath on the back of her neck, and the figure's shape seemed to move closer. Panicking, Rebecca dropped the mirror and bolted from the attic. She rushed down the stairs, her mind racing. What had she just seen? The attic seemed to grow colder, as though the presence of the figure had somehow lingered in the air. Rebecca didn't want to stay in the house anymore, but she had no choice. It was her home now. In the following days, the haunting in the attic only grew stronger. Strange sounds echoed through the house at night. Footsteps, the sound of something dragging across the floor, the unmistakable whisper of her name. The mirror which Rebecca had left in the attic was no longer in the same spot she had left it. It was always positioned differently, as if someone or something was moving it. Rebecca left the house soon after, unable to escape the chilling memories of the haunting in the attic. The mirror was never found, and the strange occurrences in the house were left unexplained. But Rebecca couldn't forget the cold breath on her neck, or the shadowy figure that seemed to watch her from the darkness of the attic. It was a haunting that would stay with her forever. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more creepy stories. Which of these stories gave you a chilling experience? Let us know. Until next time, stay curious, stay safe, and remember, sometimes the scariest stories are the ones that are real.